Okay, hey everyone. So the topic for this workshop today will be launching your product. And the check-in code should be launch your product. If you check the bottom, the check-in code, it's not startup, it's launch your product. Wasn't able to fix it in time. So this is a heads up. Cool. So the introduction for this will teach you how to launch your startup, obviously. And this workshop can be useful for people that haven't launched their product yet or have launched their product but not have been successful with it. Cool. So before we dive into some of the details of launching your product, I wanted to sort of go ahead and talk about the mindset behind launch. So most people think about launch as something that you get one shot at, right? Where every detail has to be perfect, have to have a perfect landing site, perfect product, application with full feature sets, perfect marketing plan, etc. Stressing over every single little detail to essentially make sure launch goes smoothly and right. And this could, they can spend tons of time getting this right. And, this could take up to 6 months to a year, etc. So this takes a long time and strategizing over how to get every single thing right. And with this, there's a limited number of opportunities because if you think one launch takes around 6 months to a month or 6 months to a year, there's a very good chance that if your first launch doesn't go well, you won't really have many other opportunities after that, right? So need to think of launch as more of a continuous process, and you will always be making changes and improvements to your products. And feel free to drop any questions if you guys have any along the way, and I can try to answer to the best of my ability. Okay, so why should I be launching continuously? Even before you have a fully functional product, you will essentially get a chance to practice pitching to potential customers and get feedback early on, right? So you can sort of determine how people are responding to this idea. Do people love the idea? I mean, if so, that'd be really good validation for you to continue what you're doing, right? Or is it the case where people seem indifferent and not really interested in the idea? Then maybe it's really time to pivot or pursue a different venture. So this would really give an opportunity to talk to different customers and users and see whether you should actually continue to pursue this idea or if you should take this in a different direction. Now, once you get to a point where you have an initial MVP, a very early version of your product, well, once again, you will get to see how people respond to this initial version of the product. This will give you very many opportunities to pivot as you can test out different channels for launch, right? For example, one channel might give you a huge response where everyone loves it and kind of blows up. Another channel might actually get no response at all and will help you. This will essentially help you to not only identify the best channel for a bigger launch in the future, but will also allow you to identify this is the right user base that you should be targeting. Cool. So essentially, I'll be covering these different types of launches throughout this workshop and in the next few slides. The first one would be the silent launch. Second, friends and family launch. Third, stranger launch. Online community launch. Presell launch. And lastly, the social media launch. Cool. So first is the silent launch, and it's basically nothing fancy. You have a simple landing site with a domain. You have a quick one-line pitch, which describes exactly what your company and product is supposed to be doing, and a call to action, right? So basically one sort of simple action that customers and users that see this landing site can sort of be active on. So this could be like keep in touch, sign up, register in advance, find out more, etc. And this is an example of, and this should really be very quick and should take you no more than a weekend to do ideally, because there's many good landing site makers out there, such as WordPress, Wix, Squarespace. There's tons out there to really just get something out as soon as possible. It should really take no more than a weekend. An example of this would be the initial launch of Robinhood. So as you can sort of see from the example, it's very simple, right? It has a very quick one-line pitch. Robinhood $0 commission stock trade. Stop paying up to $10 for every trade, right? So you can clearly see what Robinhood sort of stands for and what the product they're trying to serve just from that one line. And at the bottom, there's also a call to action, right? So I don't think they had a product out initially, but it was a very simple landing site with an option for you to enter your address to get early access. The next sort of launch that I'll be talking about is the friends and family launch, right? It should be pretty intuitive. And would a silent launch typically be accompanied by a marketing campaign, or would those be separate? Those would normally be separate. You don't really have to push very hard on a marketing campaign, especially for a silent launch. So this would be more of like just random strangers or just friends nearby, but this wouldn't be a huge marketing push. Cool. The next launch would be the friends and family launch. And this is essentially, pretty self-intuitive, right? You're launching to close members of your family and friends, right? And so this is sort of two phases you can go about this, where if you're at the idea phase, you can quickly pitch to friends and family, see what their response would be, right? If they enjoy it and if they, think it's good, it offers validation. While, if they don't have the greatest interest or they don't seem that interested in it, it could be, an opportunity for you once again to pivot out of something, right? You can also do this with your MVP, right? So you can send this out to friends and family, get their feedback, just sit with them, have a conversation, right? What did they like about the product? What did they dislike about it? And this would essentially offer rapid feedback for you to continuously improve on that product or go a different direction. However, one sort of thing you should be, or I guess two things you should be cautioned about is the family and friends and family members might not be completely honest, right? Because they're your friends and family, obviously. So they want to be sort of nice and they might not give you the best feedback and just, kind of not give you a very critical standpoint of the improvements. And you also, the friends and families might not be a ideal customer base because in the hypothetical situation, let's say you are building an application for college, right? Your uncle, your parents, grandparents might not be the ideal people to talk to, right? Because they're not a part of your customer base that you're sort of targeting, right? So you want to not stay in this phase for too long and try to move quickly as possible while getting feedback, obviously. Okay, so the next launch strategy I'll be talking about is a stranger launch, right? Once again, this is pretty intuitive and this is something that usually happens after you've spoken to your friends and family first, right? After you've gotten that initial feedback from them, see what they like, see what they dislike about the product. And with the stranger launch, this doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have a completed product to do this, right? And one of my favorite examples of this would be Zappos, right? I think they are a major retailer for online shoes shopping now. And initially, when there was back then when Zappos started, there was no major brand / website that you could use to purchase shoes of wide variety online. So what the founder did was he went around, malls basically and took pictures of shoes that he could find and posted them on his website, Zappos. And whenever he would get an order, he would essentially go to the store and find a shoe, purchase it, and ship it over manually, right? So this is a great example of a product and company that was launched to strangers, even without a fully functional application, right? None of the whole ordering process, shipping process was built into the application initially, but this is something that he did manually behind the scenes, right? But to the customer, it seemed like it was everything was functioning smoothly and stuff like that. But the founder was going about and doing everything manually. So this is just a great example of how you can launch to strangers without actually having a completed product. Cool. And just before I go on, I'll take a quick pause just for any questions in the chat, or if you feel comfortable, just unmute yourself and you can just ask away. Should you try to market a certain group for stranger launch? Yes, I think it'd be a good idea for a stranger launch to essentially have different sort of groups that you'd be targeting. And this would essentially allow you to see what sort of markets and user bases that this product most appeals to. What are the risks involving every type of launch? So far we've covered the silent launch, friends and family launch, and stranger launch, right? So I guess the biggest risk, there isn't much of a risk for a silent launch, as you can essentially get this done very quickly with minimal time and with a simple landing site. So there isn't too much risk involved with that. I guess the only issue I can probably see with that is if you have a silent launch and this is more of an idea that's very innovative and kind of new to this space, right? So this might give other competitors and different people, an introduction to this idea that you're pitching, which could be sort of a risk if you're one of the first people to enter that market, but that's pretty rare. Friends and family launch, sort of the same thing, but I guess the biggest risk for a friends and family launch would be that you don't want to get false validation, essentially, right? What that means is your friends and family will sort of cheer you on, right? They want the best for you, and they'll probably give you a lot of support, right, in your venture. And this could essentially give you that false sense of validation, even though there was no initial market and no desire for your product in the market initially, if that makes sense. And then lastly, for the stranger launch, it's sort of the same risk that you would probably have for a silent launch as well, in the sense that like people can probably take that idea and other competitors can see what you're up to as well. Cool. Then I will move on to the next type of launch. Next type of launch that I want to talk about is the online community launch. And what this means is you're essentially a part of multiple online communities, right? So this could be very general communities such as product hunts, Reddits, Facebook, etc. Or this could be very specific communities that are related to your product, right? So one example of this is, let's say you're trying to start like a new rideshare company of some sort, right? You could probably just go ahead and join multiple rideshare Facebook groups and let them know and just sort of converse with some of the people that are on there. What are some of the problems that they're facing? What are sort of the solutions that they've tried initially that haven't worked? And you can sort of talk to them and just try to find out as much about the community as possible, right? And when you feel ready to launch, one advice is don't try to pitch/market to that community, right? Because this could be very off-putting. And so you want to be as genuine and transparent as possible and cut out as much jargon as possible as well. And write to them as if you were talking to a friend. With that, people would be more likely to check out your product in the first place. Okay. Next sort of launch that I want to talk about is the pre-sale launch. And essentially what that means is it's pretty similar to the stranger launch and the silent launch. But what the call to action is basically you're going to pre-purchase the product, right? So you would essentially have a landing site. And if your service or product is paid, you can ask people to buy beforehand and they will receive the product when it's ready, right? So I personally feel like this is one of the best forms of validation you probably receive, right? Because when people say they want something versus actually having to pay for it, it's a very different ballpark, right? People may be nice to you initially and tell you that it's a great idea, but don't entirely mean it or would use it themselves, right? But having sort of a mechanism where people are able to pre-purchase something, right? Spend actual money, right? On your product will essentially let you know that these people definitely want this, right? As they're actually paying for it. And this will essentially allow you to determine who your actual customers will be. And these will be sort of your initial customers that you'll probably talk to a lot in the early days. How would you convince people to buy the product before it's finished, right? That's a good question. And I really think it determines, would you just try to advertise the anticipated features of your product? So basically, this would be like a landing site, right? With your one-line pitch, right? What the core functionality of your product would be, and some of the features probably, right? Maybe you have like a Figma design mockup or some sort of initial MVP version of some sort, right? You can sort of add screenshots on there, just have a quick rundown of some of the features and what the benefits are for the customer, right? And so the customer seeing this, if they really want something, right? If this is a product that they really need, I think they'd be more inclined to actually purchase it, right? Knowing that it will come out eventually. Cool. Okay, so try to differentiate yourself from other similar products and emphasize benefits. Yeah, exactly. And the last type of launch that I'm going to talk about today would be the social media launch. And this should really be sort of like a last step. And really to do a social media launch, you need to have lots of and ample amounts of validation first, because this can be very costly and time consuming, right? So what this launch would sort of consist of would be using social media channels to run marketing campaigns and ads, right? Classic ones like Facebook ads, Instagram, TikTok, etc. Very common out there, but You will need a lot of following. So you will have to have a decent amount of following for most sort of platforms to actually have a successful social media launch. And you will probably need a decent amount of capital, right? Because running ads, all this stuff would be pretty expensive to have some sort of good return on this. And basically, while this may be the most costly and time consuming, this also has the greatest potential, right? Because with the previous launches, it's very hard for people to access your product slash landing site, right? Because not many people will know about it, right? But let's say one of your ads on Instagram or TikTok just goes viral, right? This could essentially lead to exposure to your product slash service to thousands, hundred thousands, maybe millions of people, and that would essentially have the greatest potential to essentially go viral and for people to actually use your product. So basically, high risk, high reward. Or I guess high cost, high reward. So those were sort of the biggest, I guess, the main channels that are, I guess, strategies for launching that I wanted to cover. And just for the remainder of the time, I wanted to actually go through a few examples of this as well. So just a few examples of famous companies that have launched initially with, some of these strategies, right? So one of these examples would be a very famous company. I'm sure all of you guys know about it, Airbnb. Initially, this is the landing site slash product they sort of launched with, right? It was initially called Airbnb, Air Bed and Breakfast. That's the full name for it. And as you can sort of see, I know it's kind of hard to see because of the blurriness, but it's a very simple landing site. Doesn't have too many features, nor does the UI UX side seem very complicated or very nice to visually appealing to look at. But it has very simple stuff, right? The story for how Airbnb came about, the FAQ section, vacancies, and you can essentially list your airbed and see what's open, basically, right? It serves the main purpose of what Airbnb initially started off as, and does it well. Cool. And the next sort of example that I wanted to go through with another good example of this would be Uber, right? Initially, it was called Uber Cab, and basically, as you can sort of see, just like how the press example went, it is a very simple landing site, right? It has one pitch, on-demand car service via iPhone and SMS. And you have a few features on there: book a car on the fly from your phone or the web, pay from the app, no cash required, give us feedback about the driver, right? So as you can sort of see, it's very simple, nothing complex, a quick pitch, few features. I guess there's a few videos and few reviews at the bottom, but there's not much on there that is anything complicated or just a lot of clutter. So yeah, this is a good example of an initial launch from Uber. And obviously Uber is big today and has a lot more stuff on their landing site now, but that's initially what they started off with. Yeah, crazy to see how much of the UI has evolved in these companies for sure, right? It's like if you look at the Uber's website and Airbnb's website now, it's just crazy different from what it was initially when they first launched. But they did a few things well, and a lot of people needed this product. So yeah, really cool to see. Cool. So those are some of the examples, and I just wanted to basically have some closing thoughts and a summary here. Just wanted to wrap things up here and reinforce the fact that an initial launch isn't something that should be perfect, but rather it should really be more of a continuous cycle where you're constantly improvising and seeking feedback from users, right? That way you will essentially create a product that users actually want rather than something that you thought users would, right? With your own set of features, with your own set of ideas for how to proceed with this, rather than what users, solving actual users' problems, basically, right? And one of my favorite quotes regarding launch would be from Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn. And he says that if you are not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late, right? So what that means is basically you want to get, validation basically from users, right? So you want to have a very simple, very simple set of features, just a product that's on the market that people can sort of see, sort of play around with, and understand what you're trying to accomplish. And that way, try to get as much feedback as possible from these users to, shape your product in this direction. Cool. Thank you for listening. And if you guys have any questions, I'll stick around for a bit so you can drop any in the chat or unmute yourself. Is it important to target multiple groups in the product launch to see which group responds to the best to the product? Yes, I think so. And the reason why is because initially the user customer base that you might be targeting might not be the ideal user base that is matches your product, right? So it would be good to target essentially multiple different groups, right? This could be college students, it could be different segments of the market, and see what their response would be to this product, right? And so just seeing the responses and trying to track the response and the response feedback and seeing what would be the best and ideal market to go after this. Yep.